I just want to say a few words about condensation inside, because on one of the girls' YouTube channels where there was a lot of moisture under her sleeping mat, and yeah, basically I think it was mostly under the sleeping mat, under clothing, under under a foam mat, under a sleeping mat, under stuff. And I think that she was a bit concerned that her ground sheet was leaking. Now, of course, it's possible that the ground sheet was leaking, and I was hearing, you know, several people say to put another ground sheet underneath it, or a footprint or something like that. Personally, I'm not a big fan of footprints, and I've never actually used one. That's probably something I ought to try and do a video on one day, actually. And I made one suggestion that maybe she could get some silicone sealant spray and just spray the underside of the ground sheet, and realistically that's probably all that would be needed. But in reality, this is a hilly berg, and I was getting moisture on the ground yesterday. Now, it wasn't because the ground sheet is leaking, because I don't believe for 1 second that a hilly berg ground sheet is going to leak. But what it is, and I think people get confused between leaking and condensation, and basically it is condensation. And somehow, and I don't understand how, I'm not a weather expert, I'm not a condensation expert or anything like that, but somehow, for some reason, water condenses on the ground sheet, and of course it stays there. And basically, even on the open ground sheet, it's dry now because I've opened the vents. We've not had any rain today, plus it's warmed up a little bit. But yesterday, when it was very wet, even though it was open and there was nothing there, that area there was damp, and a lot of the open ground sheet was damp from condensation. And when I lifted up the ground sheet like this, again, it's quite dry now, but you know, even here you can see tiny bits of moisture under here. It's not very much because it has actually warmed up a little bit, and I have been moving it around quite a bit, but you will get there. I don't know how much you can see, but you know, it's damp. So it's not leaking, it's for some reason, some phenomenon, water condensation forms under your mat. So, you know, just a little side note, you know, to people, it's not necessarily that your ground sheet is leaking, it's that because we're in an enclosed area, condensation forms. And I had the same thought, you know, a long time ago as well, that things were leaking or water was getting in, and I queried it with someone and they said no, it's not a leak, it is condensation, and it happens under your ground sheet. So, you know, when you're in your, even if you're in your hilly bergs, and you know, my Cuban fibre, which is effectively a plastic ground sheet with my mountain laurel design stuff, you will still get moisture under your mat on that. Of course, with a cheaper ground sheet, you might get, you know, a little bit more, maybe from some pressure forcing water through. But like I said, you know, a lot of it isn't water coming through, it's that water somehow forms underneath. So, you know, just a side note to people, if you're thinking that you have moisture under your ground sheet and your ground sheet is leaking, probably isn't that. It probably is just some form of moisture getting, it just is some form of moisture that's in the air, and for some reason it collects under your ground sheet, or sorry, under your sleep mat. I don't know why, but it happens, and it isn't necessarily a leaking ground sheet. And you can have all your footprints that you want in all the whole wide world, and you're not going to get rid of moisture under your mat. I just wanted to put that in, as it's something that cropped up the other day, and people were saying, oh, you need extra ground sheets, you need this, you need that, and you need everything else. Not necessarily, no. See you in the next one. Also, as a very, very quick aside, it probably is not pressure from you sitting on your airbed or mat either, because I also noticed it under my clothing and under my mat where there was no pressure on it. It happens even when there is no pressure pushing down on a mat.